All right, welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals. We are live. Got one straggler coming in. I'm going off Wi-Fi, which is not good. I usually try to turn off my Wi-Fi and go straight wired in, but I was moving files around earlier. Okay, so in this session, welcome everybody who's watching and everybody who's in this session here, who's live with us. It's good to see you. We are looking at Ephesians chapter 4, and there is, by the way, I want to call your attention to the channel. If you're viewing from outside, we had an interesting video last night with Jedediah Pascal. It was a lot of fun. Nick and Jedediah had a chat. So when you get a chance, if you want to go check that out, I found Jedediah saying a bunch of things that I try to say, but saying them much more succinctly than I can say them. And it made me happy and jealous at the same time. But yeah, y'all go check that out when you get a chance. That video was a lot of fun to watch and to host on the channel. It was a privilege to do so. In Ephesians, we already have a chat, someone out there. In Ephesians, and I'm going to show the Bible here, we have this phrase, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lead off with what my notes are for Ephesians chapter 4. If you have chapter 20 something in your Ephesians, you need to figure something else out with what you got going on. Chapter 4, verse 25. We've been through many other of these verses. We talked about being renewed in the spirit of mind, putting on the new man, which is created after righteousness and true holiness. And the struggle we get into in typical American Christianity is to want to, and when I say American, I mean like Western Christianity, all of North and South America, including Canada. We tend to think of the new man as being sets of beliefs and rules and regulations. We think, at least in my mind, my old way of thinking would tend to be a very religious person who would be the quote unquote new man. But what we've been uncovering in these sessions together is that the new man is somebody who is meta-paradigmatic and who is not entrapped by a paradigm, who has a new fluidity and a new type of awareness of reality, rather than a new set of rules and regulations. It's a person who is matured to the point where they no longer need rules set for them. Kind of like when you reach adulthood and you don't need anybody else telling you when to brush your teeth and go to bed. It's not that you don't do those things. It's not that you don't have times to do those things. It's that you don't need somebody else telling you when and how and where to do those things. Now this verse, wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. We delved into that putting away lying concept where there's a couple different ways to look at that. And I think we kind of all agree that it could be lying that you intend to do, like you intend to deceive, or it could be lying like you're passing on something for which you have not validated an appropriate epistemic margin of confidence. You're just passing something along as if it's true when there's really no good reason for why you should believe it's true in the first place. Speak every man the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. So that's an error of omission we probably commit all the time without realizing it. We don't put away lying, we pass along lies without realizing it. So we should call much more attention to what we're saying. And then what I want to look at tonight is be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. So I'm looking at both of those verses together because they constitute one sentence, at least in the English here. This phrase, be angry and sin not, it could be, if you happen to get angry, make sure you don't sin if you get angry. Or it could be, there is a place for righteous indignation, so it's a command to be angry. I don't think that's the case, but it could be. It's worth considering. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath could be a couple things. A lot of people say, my wife and I made a decision not to go to bed angry. Well, it could also mean don't let the sun set on your wrath, in the sense of don't let it be appeased without proper appeasement, if you will. Maybe there's a time to be angry that you should stay angry. I don't know. So a couple different ways to look at that. But then neither give place to the devil, which is a very interesting phrase to me. We tend to think of a few things, like we tend to think of a personal devil there, which I don't think is totally against the idea, but there's something else I want to consider with that word too. Now, before I read these notes here, I think Russ has his hand up.
I just want to make a comment real quick. Do you think it could be that it's talking about resentment?
You stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and talk about that.
Well, what I was going to say, to me, it seemed like he's telling you how to do something. He's giving you instructions, and he's telling you why. Kind of, you know, we made that comment before. Yeah, don't let the sun go down. It could be just a matter of saying, well, don't stew in your anger. Don't take, don't be angry and then take action on that anger, or don't be responsible. I think sinning is being irresponsible. Basically. Yeah,
don't, or as a psychologist would say, don't become emotionally dysregulated.
Right.
When you're emotionally dysregulated, it's when you do things that are against your better judgment because you're motivated by the emotion.
Right.
I was talking to a therapist who actually gave me an example, who said she actually walked into the office and cussed her boss out. And then she came back a few minutes later and said, I was emotionally dysregulated, and they all spoke that same language. It happens.
Well, with Cain and Abel, do you only think that was basically the reason why Cain killed Abel, the resentment that he had?
That makes sense. Yeah, a little jealousy, a little envy, a little resentment there. That makes a lot of sense. James, are you trying to say something, or are you just waving?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I have these headphones on, so I wasn't sure.
Can you move those a little bit to where? Can you
move
turn
them?
So they, yeah, just so they cover up your face.
No, I was thinking, you know that scripture that talks about when Jesus was basically going at the Pharisees or Sadducees, one of them, and he was like, "You are of your father, the devil."
John 8.
And I was thinking about that, like, well, what? Before I always thought, well, he means their father is the devil, like, you know, either you're a child of God or you're a child of the devil. But recently, I come to think of that a little bit differently now. And I'm starting to wonder, what did he really mean by saying that?
Yeah, there's a couple different schools of thought on that. I mean, let me bring that up just so. That's weird right there. Okay. John 8:42. If I were to share this, Jesus said, okay. Jesus said, you do the deeds of your father. Then said they unto him, we be not born of fornication. We have one Father, even God. Now that's kind of seen typically as a knock on disbelieving that he was born of a virgin. It's like a knock on him. We have one Father, even God. Jesus said unto them, if God were your father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech, even because you cannot hear my word? Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there was no truth in him. And when he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Because I tell you the truth, you believe me not. He that is of God heareth God's words, therefore hear them not, because you're not of God. And then, of course, everybody who's ever gotten into a religious argument of any kind, a theological argument, they always, weaponize this and use it against each other, which is fun. It's a fun thing to do. Speaking the truth in love,
So was it that they were of their father, the devil, because they were believing and speaking lies, even though they thought they were right?
Yeah. So there's there's different schools of thought on that, or like they're literally the child of the devil. I mean, this goes all the way back to people thinking that these are actual descendants of the Nephilim, like children of the devil for real, biologically, ontologically, children of the devil. And then there's a figure of speech that's used where if you do things that tend to be characteristic of a certain type of thing, you get called the son of it back in that time frame. So when they're calling Judas the son of perdition, it's he's not saying that he's literally the son of perdition, like perdition is his biological father, but that kind of sees from that kind of stuff, that kind of thing. The so closely associated with would be a figure of speech. You are the child of, you are closely associated with, something like that. So those are different schools of thought. So, Ruth.
Hello.
Hola.
I was listening to a message, and I heard an interesting take on verse 25. So I thought I'd raise it to see what y'all think of it.
Back in Ephesians.
I am.
Okay, let me go back there.
4 and 25. And this fellow's thinking is the idea of speaking truth with his neighbor. He suggests is coming from Zechariah 8 and 16. And the thought was back in that day, it was speaking truth to the neighbor. So the Apostle Paul has changed it to with the idea not being about the promise of Israel for restoration and blessing, but I mean, he's being an encourager to build the wall, the temple, whatever. But in this case, because it's the Gentiles and the end of the verse states that we are members of one another, the idea is that we are to speak truth with your neighbor as a change from the Old Testament viewpoint. So it's an interchange of the body of Christ, because we're not addressing, it's not about unbelievers, but there's this unity and this interchange back and forth with believers, because we're there to protect and help, keep a vigil for one another was the idea. It's that instinctive protective care, which means honesty to one another. And that must be our disposition and open relationship, like Romans 12:5, because we're all members of one body and there's our responsibility.
So we're like, say it very clear. I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So we're moving from the Old Testament, Zechariah, we're moving from what to what? Speaking to the neighbor to speaking with the neighbor means changing what exactly?
He said, I think the suggestion is that the Old Testament piece was to Israel, whereas here Paul is speaking, don't walk like the Gentiles do, but because we are believers, we are members with one another. Therefore, the idea is that we are speaking truth with one another compared to the Old Testament text in 8 and 16, where it says speaking truth to. It's that idea of the interchange and the back and forth.
Yeah, that's very interesting. My first impression, not that this is right, could be wrong, but my first impression is that the New Testament quotes the Old Testament so loosely that it would not occur to me to make a big deal out of that change. Not that it isn't a big deal, but if you hadn't pointed out to me, I never would have thought of that. But
Well, me neither.
That is interesting. And then he says, "For we are members one of another." And what was the other one? Zechariah. Speak every man the truth to his neighbor, execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if that ever would have occurred to me. Yeah. Any other comments on that? All right, I want to read. I'm gonna share my notes on verse 26, I guess. Be angry and sin not, let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. I'm going to share the screen again. I hope that doesn't give anybody epileptic fits when I go back and forth between screen sharing and not sharing. I want to share the screen so people can see what we're looking at, but I want to also show people when we're talking. So this phrase, let's go to verse 26 first. So my notes say, which sin, perhaps the one mentioned in the previous verse, lying. And I've talked about that a little bit last time. No matter how angry you get, don't participate in the misinformation in order to get advantage to your to your narrative in a rivalrous dynamic situation. Wrath is not necessarily synonymous with anger. Wrath is the emotion which enhances your salience landscape and turns up the contrast. This can blind a person to non-salient or ordinary aspects of the environment and decrease sense-making capacities. So when you fly into a rage, say you're angry and you fly into a rage and you start, turning over tables and kicking the dog and stuff like that, it blinds you. You are now aware of very few things and you want to exact justice or vengeance upon those things. Wrath is the execution of that judgment. Or think of an angry girlfriend going to bash her cheating boyfriend's car in with a sledgehammer. She sees nothing else in the world except the destruction of that car. Wrath is the execution of that judgment. Anger is the enhanced salience landscape that brings on the desire to execute the wrath. One is the emotion, the other is the acting out of that anger. That's just a little by the way kind of thing. So let not the sun go down upon your wrath is a very unclear expression. It could mean don't go to bed angry. It could mean not to let your wrath be terminated prematurely. It could be a call back to verse 18. Don't let your wrath. Let's go look at verse 18 real quick, which says, having the understanding darkened from the life that is in, from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart. It will take you to a place that results in your understanding being darkened. Wrongly placed wrath will result in resentment on the part of the individual executing it and on the part of those affected. Resentment turns a tragedy into pure hell. This is where the devil reigns. It is a bottomless pit that can always get worse. Thus, the very next verse, which says, neither give place to the devil. Verse 27. So I'm going to go ahead and read my comments here too. Place to the devil. This is a call out to 2 Corinthians 2:11 in my mind, where Paul tells people, and this is important because forgiveness is in the context over here in this one. In verse 11 of 2 Corinthians 2, Paul says, lest Satan should get the advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. So the devil has devices. What's the context of that? The context is he's asking these guys to forgive somebody who did something that they need to be forgiven for. The context is forgiveness, which would indicate that lack of forgiveness would result in the devil getting advantage of us, and us failing to forgive would be among Satan's devices, would be among the devil's devices. So because of that, so we're not ignorant of his devices. The devil's devices have to do with not forgiving. See also notes on the end of verse 26, forgiving is when you no longer hold another person responsible for the damage they've caused. Or you could look at it as forgiving. This is not in the notes. Forgiving is to agapically love somebody regardless of the damage that you're pretty sure they're going to cause anyway. You take the responsibility upon yourself to better your own environment, including the damage that was caused by the other person. Your environment is something only you can improve. The vengeful insistence that some other caused your pain and that you are at the mercy of that same other for the resolution of that pain is the point where resentment turned your tragedy into a protracted, drawn-out hell that will fester, worsen, and destroy the life and opportunities of the person harboring it. It results in a reciprocal narrowing so that you can no longer have. So you might think of, let me give you a couple of examples here, and I'm going to come back to the screen in just a second. You might think of an ex-spouse who is so angry at their ex that they blame everything on the other person, and all their problems are because of their ex, Or you might think of an angry child who, for whatever reason, they're angry and they think all their problems are because of their parents. And that child might even be an adult by now. And say their life is going poorly, they don't have the job they want or whatever, and they're just going to blame it on their parents. Or this happens in politics a lot. XYZ demographic is going through a hardship, and every demographic is. And so all you have to do is blame that hardship on some other demographic. And you just found a devil for that one demographic to hate and be against, which fuels people's animosity, their tribal behavior, their in-group clinging, their othering of other people. So this happens at all levels. It happens politically, happens with any kind of in-group. It happens in personal relationships, happens all over the place. Now, I guess I'll go ahead and finish my comments here. The vengeful insist. Okay, we looked at that. Resentment, uncontrolled wrath, lacking forgiveness. This is how the devil gets a place in your life and in your social milieu, and turns it into hell. Now, I took these notes earlier today. I looked up the word devil. And the word devil comes, it's diabolos there. And if you look up the definition of that, you get traducer, false accuser, devil, slanderer. Now, what that made me think of is over here in the text when he says, neither give place to the devil. I'm not discounting the reality of a personal devil, but what I am saying is that maybe another way to say this or to convey an idea that is embedded in this phrasing, since it's associated with anger, is don't let your anger make you diabolical. Don't let your anger cause you to reduce to false accusations and slander, because that's what it will tend to do. Your anger will make you resentful. Because you're resentful, your resentment will have a narrative to it. Whoever I'm angry at did this to me, and that's why my life is horrible. You will start telling lies about that person. You will start reconstructing that person's past to fuel the justification for the resentment that you now harbor associated with your current situation. And you do that enough, and it doesn't take long. It doesn't take long at all. I'm talking, I don't know, hours. You start to form a psychosis. And a psychosis is a failure to be in touch with reality, complete failure to be in touch with reality. You're so surrounded by lies, you're so fueled by a false narrative and your willingness to bolster a false narrative that you're completely out of touch with reality in every way whatsoever. So then the anger resentment process, and I have an arrow that goes there. And in other words, it's a process. Anger turns into resentment, which would make sense why Paul would say, be angry and sin not, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Do not hold a grudge. Do not hold that anger in. Do not stay angry. Do not let it prevent you from forgiving. This process of anger to resentment, it brings with it an unwittingly adopted worldview with its own beliefs, its own paradigm, its own reciprocal narrowing, and the limited perspectival awareness and possibility of getting an optimal grip on anything in reality. Now, recently, Nick and I did a video on how a paradigm can be a type of addiction. And an addiction, we think of an addiction as a disease, but a better model that's put forth by a guy named Mark Lewis, which John Vervaeke talks about a lot, is this concept of reciprocal narrowing. So Daniel Schmachtenberger defines addiction as any kind of impulsive behavior that harms the things that we value or harms the things that we care about. And if you do that impulsive behavior enough, it starts to narrow the affordances that the arena around you offers you to be agentic, to do things, to accomplish things, to make your own life better, to make the environment better, to make the arena better. Addictive behavior narrows those affordances, and then you wind up turning back to the addictive behavior even more. So a drunk will turn back to the booze even more. A drug addict will turn back to the drugs. A paradigmatically thinking person will turn back to the in-group of their paradigm because the real world on the outside, they just can't handle it. They can't deal. Oh, I can't even, that kind of thing. They can't deal. So it actually, just as a belief paradigm has a worldview with beliefs and causes reciprocal narrowing like an addiction, anger will cause you to adapt a narrative which your resentment will fuel with lies to bolster that narrative, and you will fall out of the capacity to interact with the real world. And you get this reciprocal narrowing, this limiting perspective and awareness of the possibility of getting an optimal grip on everything in reality. So the phrasing of the optimal grip comes from the third kind of knowing, the second deepest kind of knowing, which is perspectival knowing. Perspectival awareness allows us to have an optimal grip on something. If you're so angry that all you can see is bashing in your boyfriend's car with a sledgehammer, then you cannot broaden your scope and get a better optimal grip on the larger situation, the larger circumstance. You are out of touch with the capacity to do that. And if the arena is going to be improved, if your life is going to be improved, it's not going to be because of you when you're in that state. So you can only stay there for so long. It's a non-iterable game. One way to look at it. All right, I will pause here for other people. Josh.
I got a comment. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
I really like what you said, and I feel like the way that Paul's talking to the Gentiles here in Ephesians 4, he already did the same thing in Romans 10 for the Jews. So if we could go back to that, Romans 10 real quick.
Yeah, let me go there.
So we can start with verse 2. For I bear them record that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth. So I kind of feel like it's the same concept, and Paul's just he's forming it to the context for the Gentiles in Ephesians, but he already did the same thing for the Jews, showing them that where you could use any kind of uncleanness, anger, or whatever. It's about them. They're not submitting themselves to God, and it's their own righteousness that they see, because that's all they see. They're ignorant to Christ. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's just I'm astounded that you're able to draw out that parallel, because that sounds right, and that's the model. Yeah.
That's all I got.
You want to elaborate on that any further? I want to hear.
No, it just feels like a parallel. I mean, it's just like he's telling them that they are ignorant to the righteousness of God because their zeal is not in accordance with Christ.
So going out to establish their own righteousness is the same thing as like being resentful and trying to fulfill that resentment with lies and some other kind of narrative.
I mean, that's what I'm seeing or feeling from that. So I don't know if I could. I don't know. I haven't read. I did a quick search on ignorant and the other one. I forget the other word in Ephesians 4:25, and this is one of the verses that came up. The ignorance and the blindness was the other thing. They're blind.
Oh yeah, they
So
are
it's
being
like,
blinded. Yeah, in Romans.
and he uses both of those terms in Ephesians 4:25 and Romans 10:2-3-4-5. So there's definitely a parallel, whether it connects all the dots.
Yeah. So yeah, you get this blindness in Romans 11:25 in the same context here. I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness as part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And then back in Romans 9, if you go to Romans 9, you have this, Paul starts off with, really heaviness in his heart about Israel, and the heaviness that he has. He's like, I wish I myself could be accursed for their sakes. But what's happening to them is they're being hardened and blinded. He hath mercy on whom he will, and whom he will he hardeneth. And then the context, he's hardening Jews there. So their Jews are being hardened and blinded, and they're attributing the unrighteousness to God, ostensibly. Yeah. Jamie.
Yes. Hey, everyone. Kevin, when I was listening to you speak about on your notes there, a couple of things that came to my mind. I just saw anger being a huge open door where we can take two pathways. One pathway, we could allow that anger for us to do something positive, or allow that anger to fester and cause resentment and take us down a wrong road. Then all of a sudden my mind went to 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 and 5. It says, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So way I'm seeing this now, as soon as, we're all going to get angry. God even gets angry. So I don't think anger itself is a sin. But we can allow it to cause us to sin, so to speak. So if we go down the wrong path, I say, I like application. So I'm already going to application for myself personally.
So you said at the beginning of your statement, and sorry if I cut you off.
No, that's okay.
You said at the beginning of your statement that anger is a chance to do something good or a chance to do something bad. You have an example of a good thing that anger could prompt you to do?
Sure. So have you ever driven along beautiful country roads? Where I'm from, we have a lot of mountains, and you see a lot of dirty ditches. You see a lot of trash in the ditches.
Yeah.
I get really angry. At it because I'm thinking, why can't you throw the trash in the garbage can? So what I'm going to do is say, I'm going to use that anger and clean up that trash.
Yeah.
Now, that's just an example.
That's a great example.
So,
I have things like that too. Like last night, I just played volleyball.
right.
I did not do well. I was angry. I wasn't like mean to anybody. But I'm
No.
just really disappointed with myself, and it causes me to like recommit to better fitness regimens, if you will.
Right. There you go. Try
to perform better.
Could I throw in
Have a
one?
positive outcome of the anger.
I have an example too. Say a researcher who's angry at a disease and works motivated with the anger to come up with a treatment or possibly or hopefully a cure. That's all.
I thought about that, Joe,
That's a
recently.
good one.
Something that kind of was heavy on my heart. I know not everybody can do everything, but I thought that maybe everyone who is on one of those campaigns to raise awareness for some kind of disease, like raise awareness for, colon cancer or for Parkinson's disease or something like that. Everyone who's on something involved with something like that probably has firsthand experience with it, either in their own life or in a family member's life. And it makes me wonder how many people are involved in drives like that passionately where it hasn't touched them personally. I don't know. I don't have any statistics on that. Someone talked about them throwing trash out their window makes them upset. Billy.
My mind goes to in the Old Testament where Satan and Michael are disputing over Moses' body.
Yeah.
And it says, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but
it's chronologically in the Old Testament and mentioned in Jude 9. Yeah.
And Michael did not make a railing accusation against Satan.
Yep.
So there was a dispute. So the dispute must have been a little bit, this tension. And so I'm just saying, he responded without a railing accusation. So I don't know. That's a very interesting.
Well, yeah. If anybody could be accused of something, certainly the devil, right?
Yeah.
And for Michael to exercise the restraint to not accuse the devil of something in a railing way, that's you get a yellow ribbon for that. Valorous restraint.
I mean, it's a very interesting concept. So it's how we respond with our anger. We have to think when we're angry. It's like with my daughters, if I ever, get in a biblical discussion and it just kind of goes in a different way. And, or for instance, I don't agree maybe what they're doing and then it heats them up. I like to resolve it before I go to bed. meaning
Yeah.
I like to resolve it where they don't feel resentment. They don't feel, you know what I'm saying? There's something that lifts off you, and it's like, here in Ephesians, it talks about the Holy Spirit, and it's just one of them things where it's a weight taken off you, but there's something there that if you go to bed with your anger, I feel it does give the devil some kind of foothold somewhere.
So let's bring technology into this. Let's bring gender and technology into this. So if you look at neither give place to the devil, I like to imagine the devil as this part of me that lives inside of me that can come out of me if I'm not careful. Like I have the capacity to be diabolical and to be slanderous and to be falsely accusatory. And I have the capacity to act in such a way that can turn my life into a living hell. So I like to think of it practically that way. Now, I don't think the real person of the devil is in me. It's not like that. But in a practical sense, I have the capacity to do to my life everything that the devil would do to it. And he probably wouldn't have to do it himself if he could just get me mad enough, right? I'm kind of guessing that's probably true for just about everybody. So some of our psychological literature tells us, or just experimental literature tells us, that when men get angry, they tend to lash out with physical aggression. And when women want to get aggressive, the way they express that aggression is through reputation destruction, through slander. So that's what the data tells us, And now, that being the case, we live in a period of time where you can use social media to really put some slander out there. So if any one of you were getting into an argument with your spouse tonight, one of you could go smear them all over social media. And it's a really it's a really dumb thing to do that kind of thing. It's extremely dysregulated behavior, and I highly recommend against it. But there is that temptation there to use this tool, which can reach hundreds of people, and just trash somebody, even somebody that's supposed to be close to you in your life. Ruth, were you throwing your hand up to say something? No? Or
I
not?
can, but after you're done, I was just typing.
Oh, well, I know somebody who, people go down a path. I knew somebody years ago who would be in agreement with me that you never post anything negative on social media. Like, I might post something negative, like, I don't like what Walmart's doing with the shopping carts these days. I don't know, just something impersonal like that. Who cares, right? But I'm not going to lash out at a personal acquaintance or friend or somebody or enemy personally on Facebook, And when you see somebody, and I know somebody like this, and then I saw this couple split up, and then one of them takes to social media and starts like really going to town on their ex in social media, just absolute baloney stuff all over the place. And that same person would earlier in their life would have been the same kind of person to say, that's trashy, you shouldn't post negative stuff like that online, but here they are doing it. See? So it caused, the anger can cause a person to change their value set of what they do and don't think is appropriate behavior, as well as become diabolical. But this whole technology thing is kind of scary. The way some people have worded it is we have the technology of gods, but without the wisdom of gods, and that's one of the ways that we can do that. We can reach out, we can thus saith the Kevin to 11,000 subscribers on YouTube, but should I? Probably shouldn't. Ruth, were you gonna say something?
Well, I don't know if it's of much import, but the be ye angry, is there a sense that we are to be angry? We've lost the balance. Like I just think of, say, you with Calvinism. It's so easy to get complacent and not want to stir things up. But if the result is to neither give place to the devil, if we aren't being, quote, angry, maybe angry like Mark 3 and 5, where
This is very interesting.
when he looked around about them or on them with anger, being grieved at the hardness of their hearts, ... It just gets me thinking about, are we so big on unity that we're forgetting that be ye angry and do not sin when there's things that have to be spoken to? We've lost a balance and maybe diluted our standards.
I think that's an excellent example. I just want to highlight that verse here just on the screen so people can see that in Mark chapter 3, verse 5. And when he looked around about on them with anger, being grieved at the hardness of their hearts, he saith unto them, stretch forth thine hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored whole as the other. When Jesus got angry, he actually did something good for somebody. If you look in Matthew 5, which I'm going there, it'll say Jesus is kind of going over what somebody might call the constitution of the kingdom. He said, ye have heard by them of old, thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council, and whosoever shall say thou fool shall be in danger of hellfire. That's a very interesting verse that gets tossed around a lot. But this phrase here, whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause, that phrase without a cause, I mean, without a cause, qualifies that. Like it is okay to be Mark 3:5 angry, but it's not okay to be angry without a cause. Interestingly, let's look at I think some of the new Bibles remove that phrase. We're in Matthew 5:22. Yeah, some of the new, that's the ESV there. They just take the phrase out, because the older, better, more reliable manuscripts, obviously. The more reliable ones that make Jesus out to be a sinner, I guess. But yeah, that's a really good point. So I guess the point, if you were to take it to the Calvinism thing, it would be, yes, do be righteously indignant and don't give quarter to this false stuff, but also don't lie about James White or John Piper, because it's real easy. It's real easy when you get tit for tat and you see how these people can act. It's really easy to give it back to them, give them back what they asked for. That's not what we should do, though. I think we should model the correct kind of behavior while not giving them quarter.
I haven't thought on that.
Yeah, Joe and then Billy.
Oh, I didn't see Billy.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay, well, in communicating, like lie not to one another and tell the truth, that's evokes communication. And when communicating with other people, if you throw anger into the equation, one person could look at the other and say, oh, you're angry, and completely denigrate whatever the person's doing or saying because they're angry, and angry is wrong. This I'm thinking of maybe something like gaslighting, or not exactly that maybe, but just like Jesus was angry when he healed somebody, and a researcher could get angry at a disease and do something good
Right.
and about it. And so I think that could be
with Calvinism infiltrating a bunch of churches unwittingly.
Yeah, a problem in people interacting with people. If somebody is doing something good, but they have some emotion in their voice or body language, that's like Jesus did, and then other people can denigrate it and accuse them of being in the flesh or, not spiritual or something. So that's something I think it's good to beware of and to try to avoid that. So that's it.
Yeah. I really like those examples of sometimes there is a cause. There is, I think anger sometimes is a motivation to do something, but you got to make sure that you're not missing the mark when you do it. You're not resorting to slander and lies and diabolical behavior and false accusations, that sort of thing. Jamie.
I think Billy had something.
Could we?
Yeah, Billy was supposed to go after Joe.
Go ahead.
So I go after you. It's good.
I just forgot because I have.
Oh, it's not a big deal. I'm the newcomer on the block. I don't want to like.
Okay, well, I guess we'll go to Jamie first, and then
That's fine.
We'll go to Billy.
That's fine. Either way. So back to 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Could we just ask the question here? Could we, or an observation, could we utilize these verses to take every thought captive, casting down imaginations in order to sin not, so to speak? Could we?
So like have the emotion of anger, but not let it dysregulate you?
Correct.
By examining all the thoughts, like what are all the things that come into my mind that I want to do, and how do I make sure that I don't do them?
Correct. Yes, sir. Can we apply these verses to that? Or would these verses apply to what we're discussing?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because that's in 2 Corinthians.
Yes, sir. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 and 5.
So the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringeth it into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So if godliness is profitable to all things, then godliness is profitable to comporting yourself well. And the knowledge of God would include in all things the knowledge of how to not be emotionally dysregulated when you are feeling some kind of emotion. So when you feel anger, you would no doubt imagine maybe something bad, maybe something that you would like to do to the object of your anger. You don't want to go bash their car in with a sledgehammer or something like that. And then you would exercise this to regulate yourself, regulate those thoughts, and cast down those imaginations before you go do something stupid that would be costly to you.
Okay, great.
We have a Billy.
Okay, I think it's like a wheel, and you got spokes going out, and I think exactly what you just talked about is like going off the hub, and there's spokes to the outer wheel. And I think James 3 also could, if you could pull up James 3.
Yeah.
And you don't have to read the whole thing, but like go to James 3:6, and it's dealing with the tongue.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I thought of this earlier too. That's exactly a really good point.
I mean, it's really, because it's like when we're angry, we want to spit out and say, it's like the Moses thing with no railing accusation.
Yeah.
That's like, he's not speaking just frivolously. You know what I mean? It's like Michael took his time to think, and he actually didn't even say anything because there was no railing accusation. I guess what I'm trying to say is the tongue, according to James, is kind of like off that spoke. It's just like where you go. And I think you could tie a lot of Bible verses to this anger thing, and they would all be, in continuity with what the verse is saying.
So much going through my mind at this exact moment. Most things before they become actions or before they become things start off as words. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and is set on fire of hell. Well, everything, like last night's video, they said something about propositions, like propositions are freeing and restricting at the same time. I have a beautiful guitar next to me that I think is wonderful. That started off somewhere as an idea in somebody's head and came out as words at some point. That's where it started. And then people started acting on those words and then eventually have this guitar. Same thing happened with a Ferrari. Same thing happened with whatever car or house you like, or whatever it is that you like started off as thoughts and words at some point, as well as, 17 million people that died in World War II started off with ideas and words as well. So just ideas and words can really reshape the environment into something amazingly great or to something very terrible.
I can follow up on this a couple things.
Yeah.
Can't see that. Remember the emotion wheel you sent me?
Yeah.
That's what I had in my mind when Billy was talking about the spokes, a wheel with spokes on it.
Oh, interesting. Now I'm Googling it again. Is that all you're going to say?
No, I got a couple more things, but
So I'm like, all right.
Yeah, so there's a question I wanted to kind of ask. Has anybody ever felt like, I think I've felt like this recently, where I'm in a situation and I feel like I'm supposed to be angry, but I'm not.
Huh.
And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know if there's like too much of like a dissociation away from like what ought to be, kind of embodied or felt or something. But like in Ephesians has the phrase heavenly places like 4 or 5 times, I think.
6, yeah.
And when Kevin was talking earlier about anger coming out as wrath or frustration or unrighteous wrath, and that it has this narrowing effect and a blinding effect, like Josh kind of brought out. If you're seated in heavenly places, it kind of feels like that you're in a place constantly where you're noticing your emotions and not necessarily beholden to them or whatnot. And if you're in that place, it allows you to do the thing in 2 Corinthians 13, I think it was, that Jamie brought up, or is it 12, in the like, not like noticing the thoughts or the emotions and then holding them captive. Like, not like, if you think of yourself as like on a bridge and then your thoughts and emotions as the stream of water that's going under the bridge, and you're noticing like the stick or the leaf or the frog or the lily pad that's flowing down the stream. And like that has, I think that has kind of if you practice that a lot, it can help not allow you to fall into that trap where, like that Jamie brought out, where you can choose to do this or to do that with the emotion, especially when we're talking about anger. Because I feel like there's also this added dynamic where we can displace our anger. And so we could be, you think of like a 13-year-old or something who, has just discovered, like, I don't know, their parents are hypocrites or something like that. And so they don't really know that, like, they couldn't articulate that in a like mature fashion. So they're like angry at the world in a sense. And so their anger gets displaced. So that's another added layer to the.
Like because they couldn't articulate the genuine source of the anger, it gets misplaced into other things.
It gets redirected. Yeah.
Like,
And I think that happens.
At work and they take it out on their family or something.
I think that happens a lot more often than, somebody cuts you off on the highway and you get mad at them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's a displacement of an anger if you're a lot more often. I think it's harder to notice sometimes.
So when child psychologists, when they're dealing with children, and what I'm about to say is that the way I was raised to like compartmentalize my anger and not do anything about it. And then you wind up with, like, my brother had real anger issues. I'm glad I did not ever have those anger issues, but he really did. And people handle things differently. And so you're basically living in denial of all the things that are supposedly bad. And I don't think it's very healthy. I think it's more healthy to be very much in touch with exactly what you're feeling. You got to know what you're feeling, because emotions happen in the body and they're informing you of something, instinctively. They're telling you something. You got to calibrate them and figure out what they're telling you. So a child psychologist, when they're dealing with children, they will tell the child that, imagine you're a bus and all your emotions are passengers on the bus, and all the emotions, and they'll bring out the little emotion wheel. All your emotions are allowed to come on the bus, and they can ride as long as they want to, but you have to keep following all the traffic laws as the bus. You can't run into the ditch or into the tree or run somebody over. You have to keep being a good bus. And so when the passengers come on the bus, you acknowledge them and you say their name, like, hello, Anger, how are you? Please have a seat. Welcome aboard. You can ride with me for 9 blocks, then you got to get off, something like that. I don't know. But you're a bus and all the emotions are allowed to get on. And I tried this with my children. It seems to go very well, to where they feel like they're allowed to have their emotions. They're allowed to feel them. Like, they're not evil for having the emotion, but they also know to restrain themselves from acting poorly as a result. Don't let the emotions get in charge. Let them be an informant, not the boss. Something
Yeah, I
like
have a thought on what you, Kevin and Nick were just saying.
Yeah.
Ready for? Okay. I was just thinking about that. Suppose somebody says something that upsets me. I can say, well, I'm not happy to hear that, and that's true. Or I could say, why do you hate me? And that's where we're going beyond the feeling. And I think of what Nick was saying about, they don't know what they're angry at, so they kind of get angry at everything. So, you had this feeling you didn't like what somebody said or did, but you go beyond that to assume that there was a motive. So it's going beyond what you know for sure, and maybe getting angry at somebody because you assume a motive that may not even be there, and that may not be true at all.
So yeah,
and
the
you're
assignment
judging
of motives. Yeah, that goes along with paradigmatic thinking too.
and it's judging according to the appearance. The Bible says, judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment.
Yeah, John 7:17. Yeah. Jamie, if Joe is finished.
Yeah, go ahead, Brother Joe.
Are you finished, Joe? I don't want to cut you off.
Sure, I'm done.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Okay, Nick, I was listening to what you was talking about you hit on something I've been working on myself, is placing my focus on the heavenly places by seated position. And what you said really resonates with me, because if I understand you correctly, what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong here, Nick, is that you're saying when we are focused on the heavenly places, are you saying that it is actually buffering our reality meaning while we're focused on the heavenly places or seated position, are we, if I could describe this, articulate this correctly, are we basically using it as a buffer from reality? Say something is supposed to be making you angry and you feel like you're not getting angry. Is that because you're focused on your heavenly places? Basically
But-
acting as a shock absorber to your emotions. Is that what you're
So-
saying possibly, or am I
So
off there?
I'm saying like so many things that I can't actually, I can't actually keep hold of it. But
Okay,
I think
sorry.
I think this is kind of like a bleed over from what you've been getting at with the being on autopilot kind of thing.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm trying to relay is there's this phenomenon that's happening with me, has been happening with me over the course of a couple years, where if I take a particular perspective, like something like being crucified with Christ, or being seated in heavenly places, or any of these perspectival verses in the Bible, right, where you can appropriate some kind of a perspective that the author is talking about, then what happens is that there's some kind of like a dissociation of your ego or of yourself in a way. And what that does is because of Christ and his personality and his character and all, it kind of does serve as this buffer where it doesn't get to touch you anymore in Christ. And the thing I wanted to kind of sort of tease out a little bit is that sometimes I feel like that's not a good thing. And I don't know how to say this any better, because I feel like in times where I probably should have been angry, I wasn't. Like I probably should have noticed that there was an opportunity here, or God was putting something in front of me, and that it was like, you need to understand anger and proper wrath in this situation, and that because of the Christian kind of morality that's been relayed to me, it's helped me, but it's also, I haven't been able to make this leap or this discernment that's so, like, it's the razor thin line in this discussion that Kevin brought out a lot earlier, between what's the proper way to act out in anger and sin not. And I feel like I miss out on like a God-given opportunity to express and feel that righteous anger, because I'm constantly dissociated from myself. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yes. Thank you for that. Okay.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Hey, Nick. So I really want to tie a couple things together, and it has to do with what you were talking about last night on your video. You're talking about engendering. And I know there was a phrase used about the ego as passenger. And I feel like what we've been doing tonight is really kind of flushing out a lot of things in the verse on anger in the procedural. And I want to kind of see if we can dive deeper back down to the perspectival. And I was hoping we could do like a compare contrast. So I'm kind of looking for your insight on this, where it talks about giving place to the devil. Can you do that? Would you be able to do that kind of engendering with that phrase, giving that phrase to the devil, or giving place to the devil, like a personality, an engenderment, where we could compare and contrast what's the opposite of that? And I feel like if we could do that and flush that out a little bit, we can kind of get more of a perspectival knowing on that transformation and and go from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I feel like we're at that, this is like kind of magical. Like the conversation is in this place where we're all in visualizing like this circumstance happening, and then going through this almost simulated anticipation of how, we as Christians are able to dissociate from the situation and notice like, hey, this is anger right here. And these are all the, spokes of the wheel that it could go down. And these are the pathways it could go. And now we're trying to like precisely identify what exactly is that perspective that just needs to be adjusted slightly when we zoom out, so that when we go back down into the engendering of our ego, that we have the proper righteous procedural knowing, and then maybe the propositional knowing where some kind of truth comes out of our mouth.
So would it be helpful to flush out like Kevin was doing, where he was using giving place to the devil as letting the anger make you, or you allow the anger to let you get to that place where you can be diabolical on a perspectival layer? Can we engender that? Do we just look at what the devil is and give it more of a personality, and then contrast that with Christ and the person of Christ and being seated in the heavenly place? Is that helpful?
I think it's just kind of like delineating two different things in a moment for all of us, that it's like we can personify Christ, very easily, because we have so much, information about him in scripture and we have so much like stories, and like everybody knows about Jesus and exactly who and what he looks like and all this kind of stuff. But to not give place to the devil seems to be so much more, to the personification of the devil seems to have so much of a greater bandwidth of like possibility, that we can, like you were trying to say, engender. And we probably do that more often than not, right? So that's kind of like the delineation, or the line that I'm trying to stick with you on here.
Yeah, I'm trying to be really intentional about it. When I see that verse, Ephesians 4:27, neither give place to the devil. Yeah, I have a concept of the devil, but I haven't really associated reading that kind of a verse outside of just like a procedural. And so I'm trying to get it a little deeper.
So does that deeper involve you like considering what the perspective of the devil would be in this instantiation? So like a John Milton kind of Paradise Lost, where you get to kind of like take Satan's perspective and then consider.
I don't know. I kind of get lost on that stuff because I'm not philosophically trained, and there's certain things that, like when you talked about stuff yesterday, it was kind of over my head. So I don't know.
Yeah, it was all over my head too. I was like, yeah. But yeah, is that kind of like one of the things that you're trying to get at is that the perspective of what it would be like to act out the thing that would be giving place to the devil? Is that like to consider it?
I was kind of just hoping you could give me more of like an example of an engendering, because when you guys talk, I feel like you talk about that stuff a little more philosophically than I'm trained for. So maybe give me a simplified example so that I can kind of picture it a little better.
So like in the middle of the day, like when you have a circumstance happen to you, and then when you have something happen, and then the moment where you notice yourself, to me, you could like, that's a moment where you've zoomed out of yourself because you're noticing yourself. And then when the moment comes where you kind of like lose that perspective, you've engendered the moment. You've like entered back into your ego. Like, so to think of the ego as like a sort of a matrix, like a woman's womb kind of thing, where the seed that's going to be placed back into the womb and birth something is the engendering of the ego or the matrix or the matrix, that kind of thing. So you want to be cognizant of what are the fruits of the situation, because the fruits will indicate to you the sort of seed that engendered your ego and as you acted out some kind of situation.
So wait, a couple of thoughts are entering my mind as well, to hit kind of on what you're both saying, is the engendering of that is like the definition of addiction that Daniel Schmachenberger gives. When your emotion causes you to act in an impulsive way, which winds up harming the things that you care about. If you think of the devil, you associate the devil with hell, you associate the devil with lies, and you start to act in a way that turns your life, hell being a bottomless pit that you can't escape from, it turns your life into more and more of a bottomless pit. They don't call it hitting rock bottom for nothing. There is a place where you are constant. There's fewer and fewer affordances to escape or to climb or to elevate higher. And when you act out in anger, it gives rise to this thing. Now, when it comes to seeing your ego as like a passenger, as a different person, Paula and I have to deal with this on a regular basis. There's two people in our lives that have been what you might call emotionally dysregulated on a regular basis and very disruptive. And it's natural to take these people seriously and to let it anger you, the things that they would say and how belittling and hurtful these people can be when they talk to you. But the approach that we've taken is these people are dysregulated. They're not well, they're dysregulated so often that what they say doesn't matter. And it'd be similar. The example that I used while talking to her was like, I want you to imagine, and I think Joe had an example like this recently. Imagine a child comes up to you, a child who's 2 or 3 comes up to you and tells you your car's a piece of junk, or that your job is stupid, or that you're ugly, or something like that. You wouldn't take that kid seriously, come back when you're 35 and then let me know what you think. And so I told Paula, I'm like, when these things happen, because she's like, how can you, this person says all this to you and you just sit there like it doesn't matter. I'm like, well, the person isn't well. It's like a child. It's like if a child is insulting me, I just don't take it seriously. And in that fashion, if anything is really insulting my ego, or that with which my ego is identified, like say I identify with a particular paradigm and somebody's making me mad because they're opposing that, I have to see it in that same way. I have to see it as this other thing that is involved, which really doesn't affect me at all. Just like you would see a child insulting you, it doesn't really matter to you. Lester Roloff used to take people, he has a story where he took somebody out, these people in the church were arguing about some deacon or something was insulting them. So he took them out to the graveyard and he said, I want you to look at that grave right there. I want you to cuss up a storm at it, so they did. Okay, now I want you to say a whole bunch of nice things. And they did. So like, well, don't you feel better? No. Why not? Because they're dead. See, it doesn't matter when they're dead. And it's a really great example, object lesson, when you really are dead to, because your life is in Christ. what people say or do to your physical life, if your life really is Christ to do with as he pleases, and you haven't done anything wrong that you could have avoided, that, you know, outside of the will of God or something like that, and things happen, they are what they are. I heard somebody say, if you put a teaspoon of salt in a cup of water, like 8 ounces of water, and drink it, it's going to be disgusting. But if you put it in a pond of water and drink it, it doesn't, you can barely tell us, you don't tell us there at all. Be the pond, be bigger, be the pond. So a couple more comments on what Nick was saying, then I'll stop talking. 2 things happened when you were talking about feeling emotion that you shouldn't feel, or not feeling emotion that you thought you should have felt. I'm not saying that what I'm about to say is a reference to that precisely, but sometimes this can be weaponized in a moralistic rivalrous dynamic. And the example that I'm thinking of is somebody was talking about encountering the CRT movement, you know, the woke people. And they're like, well, aren't you outraged? And the idea was that if you're not outraged at the particular thing, then you're somehow less than moral because of it. But in reality, you can only be outraged at so many things before you exhaust yourself and fall over dead. You can't, there are enough things in this world. There are enough, you know, things in this world that you could be outraged about. You just be outraged all the time. So you kind of have to pace yourself. You have to kind of know what's out there. Like, there are a lot of other injustices happening in the body of Christ. I've happened to choose Calvinism as the thing that I'm dealing with. Well, people ask for videos on other things all the time. I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth for that. I don't have the bandwidth to deal with Seventh-day Adventist and Calvinism. I'm not like, maybe some people do, but, you know, I got other interests, if you will. So you got to pick. And so I want to also make it very clear to you that you can't do everything. So when it comes to either helping poor people or what you're going to be angry at and jump on the bandwagon cause for, you can't do everything. So you have to pick something. You have to pick something that is worth your time and attention and energy, and exercise yourself there. And at the same time, don't let somebody else make you feel guilty if you don't have the appropriate emotional response they think you should have at something. Because you're responsible for metering out, you're responsible for, you know, rationing out how much emotional energy you have to give, which you may be tapped out for the day for all I know. I don't know what's happened to you this day or this week. Some of y'all might have, you know, lost a pet or something or been fired. I mean, you never know what's happened to somebody. And why would they be outraged because they got called a name when something worse than that happened to them earlier in the week? So you only have so much to dish out, and you have to be in charge of rationing that out for yourself. I'll stop talking here. Jamie.
There we go. I'm off mute now. I was looking at Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 and 27. Be ye angry and sin not, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. And again, I'm going to say, this is my disclaimer. I'm not very good at my grammar or colon. So I'm looking at what does a colon do? It says it is used to give emphasis. And the next sentence is neither give place to the devil. So way I am seeing this right now is if we let our sin go down upon our wrath, or could this be, or else the devil will, or you're leaving an open door to the devil. Would that be a correct assessment of that? Or
yeah, the colon indicates that that what follows, neither let the sun go down upon your wrath. And then it would follow that if you would, it would give place to the devil. So neither give place to the devil either. Yeah, it's connected like that. At least
So
translators.
go ahead.
So the way I'm seeing it now, I guess, I'm trying to compare and contrast giving place to the devil with giving place to Christ. And I'm going back to Psalm 37:7 through 10. And I guess this is more on the procedural understand the procedural knowing of what it's like. For me, this is what I'm seeing as giving place to Christ or giving place to God. It says, rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Where are we at? Let me see.
Right.
Yeah.
Side.
Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Cease from anger, forsake wrath, fret not thyself in any wise to do evil, for evildoers shall be cut off, but those that wait upon the Lord shall inherit the earth. So for me, that's kind of where I'm going in my mind, is like, well, what's the opposite of giving place to the devil? I'm giving place to Christ. I'm waiting patiently on him. And that's the embodiment of it for me.
I really like that. There is a waiting game. I can't remember, there's an example of this came up yesterday when I was talking with Paula, where there was a time to just wait. I can't remember what the context of that was though. And it really made me rethink of that phrase, those that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. There's a time to actually, you wait for the right moment. So with all this, and I want to field this, we got just a couple minutes left, but I want to field this thought out there in Romans chapter 12, verse 19. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. And then somebody asked, well, are we just supposed to be a doormat? You know, I'm inclined to say I don't think we are, for a variety of reasons. Any comments on this? Any thoughts on this?
I think it goes back to Romans 10, verse 2, 3, and 4, where you're defining righteousness yourself. It's a self-righteousness. It's like you're creating the law. You're not surrendering yourself or submitting yourself to Christ.
And I think standing up for yourself and fighting back are very different from vengeance.
Yes, I agree with that completely.
Vengeance is that's a whole nother thing. That's basically like hunting somebody down to make them pay for what you perceive they did to you. And the point of this passage, and it comes from the Old Testament as well, is that vengeance does not belong to us. Vengeance is entirely the purview of God. And when we try to take vengeance ourselves, we are placing ourselves in God's place.
So when I was in, this is good, I'm glad you brought that up. Because that's a really good point, Dan. It reminds me of what they said when I was in Texas. I was taking a concealed handgun class in Texas, and they were very specific about the laws there. And they said, if you were to, you're allowed to use lethal force enough to stop the threat. Any more, and you go to jail. So
Right.
If, like, say you walk home and somebody's in the kitchen beating up on your wife, right? If I walk in and shoot the guy and he stops beating up on my wife, and then, or let's say I miss, right? And then he gets up and runs, and then I shoot him, he's running out the house. I'm in trouble if I do that. I'm in trouble if I shoot him on the way out, but I'm not in trouble as long as I'm stopping him from causing the harm. I can stop him from causing the harm. I can stand up for myself according to the law, but I can't exact vengeance out of anger for something they've done. I can't chase them down and shoot them when they're running.
Yeah, and I think that's the same principle.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I like that. I was at a parent-teacher conference. Was it last week, week before? And the teacher told me to use the phrase, your daughter self-advocates very well. That was a very great way to say that. And it made me think of that when it comes to like standing up for yourself would be self-advocating. So if I'm acting in my own best interest, I'm not trying to cause harm to somebody else. But if I'm acting in my own best interest because I know what's healthy for me, and I know what's toxic to me, and I have boundaries with other people, you self-advocate. I like that phrasing.
I have a thought. The doormat, being a doormat, or like being a doormat is one position, and being a vengeful maniac is the opposite extreme, maybe. And I think of instead of going to those extremes in that case, what about moderation? And I think that seems to apply to being angry and sinning not. You know, you don't have to get so you don't or can't feel angry. I mean, if somebody steps on your foot, you feel the pain, right? And to some extent, you know, you may feel anger, but you don't have to go punch your neighbor in the nose. You can be angry. And
Yeah.
but yeah, and I thought about something else that may be helpful.
Bob Jones Sr. used to say, "Your right to swing your arm ends where my nose begins."
Okay, yeah. In Psalms 119, it's great peace. It says, "Nothing shall offend them."
Yeah,
And
great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them.
right. So it may help to not have as many temptations there if you get into meditating on some truth from God's word, or you know, the nature of God, of reality. And the last thing I thought of about being a doormat, in Titus 2:15, it says, "Let no man despise thee." And in 1 Timothy 4:12, "Let no man despise thy youth," to Timothy. So I think in that case, you don't need to go to the extreme of being a doormat, but you don't need to go to the opposite extreme either.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-advocate. All right. Have we had our emotional therapy session for the evening? That's what I kind of feel like this was. We covered some CBT stuff in here too. Were you gonna say something, Ruth?
Well, I have one, it's along the emotional therapy line, and it was mentioned with the emotional wheel. And I'm just wondering if it's verses like this one in 26, where for those of us that have grown up in a generation of Christianity, where there's almost, and it's propositional based Christianity, therefore it's skewed because you're following rules. It's not relationship like you mentioned last night, Nick. These apostles and disciples didn't get to know Jesus by following the rules. They just knew him and loved him. And I love that. That was a very rich statement.
Yeah,
and I wonder, I just feel like the lack of looking at feelings, and maybe my generation in the Christian world, is almost going the other way with verses like this to an extreme. And things are so cockeyed now almost because of swinging that way, instead of a balance of be angry and do not sin.
Yeah.
You know, something occurred to me, that going to some of these extremes may also risk losing perspective, losing the perspectival knowing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You get tunnel vision when you get angry. You only see the one thing. Like So I what's I gonna say? It's tied together with whatever Ruth just said. I can't remember what it is. So when it comes to, I found myself years ago getting very angry with Calvinists. Like I would be in discussion with them, things like that. And as I learned about paradigms, and as I kind of did some growing up myself, and I learned about ideological possession and then tried to not be that way myself. When I do encounter somebody that's ideologically possessed, they're blinded by their ideology in the same way that anger can blind somebody. So when a Calvinist says something that's really completely inane, instead of reacting angrily, I find that my reaction to them now is the same that it would be if a blind person stumbles into me. I wouldn't be angry at them. I mean, they stumbled into me. They just don't know what they're doing. They can't see. So instead of me being angry with how they've treated me or what I believe, I see a blind person. I actually have pity and sympathy for that person. Wow, look how blind they are. And that can sound weaponized and insulting. That's really not how I mean it. And maybe I shouldn't have said Calvinism for that, but ideologically possessed people, you start, it is, I don't, I'm not angry with them. And the emotion that I feel is not anger. It's more of pity when I encounter people like that.
And you know, Kevin,
I'm
that's
less likely to flip over tables and things like that, which I've never been that kind of person anyway.
you know what that sounds like to me? What the way Jesus saw the people crucifying him when he said, "Forgive them; they don't know what they're doing. They're blind."
Yeah, that's
Sort
right.
of.
He looked out on his, he had compassion on as a sheep without a shepherd. Yeah.
And I've been trying to understand the methodologies of persuasion that Calvinists employ to try to understand them and explain them, and hopefully to help other people notice them and see them and go, oh, that's one of those tricky, deceptive manipulation tactics.
Yeah, like instead of just seeing the argument and a counter argument, you see with the underlying moral framing under the
Right.
argument. That kind of thing, to start to see the type of thing they're doing, not just the exact thing they're doing.
Yeah, like if you don't agree with my interpretation of this verse, then you don't believe Jesus.
Yeah, they go moral with it. No true Scotsman fallacy. You're not the real thing, or you're some kind of man exalting reprobate.
Yeah.
That's an ideological possession. People tend to go moral with it, and it happens the same way. Like if the global warming crowd, if you drive a big truck like I do, you're immoral for it. It's not just that you disagree; you're immoral. When people have disagreements and they jump right to accusing the other one of like they know what their motives are or they know what their morality is, you've left epistemics and you've gone to ideological possession.
Yeah.
We are at 8:38. It's a little over. Jamie, I'm gonna let you have the last word.
All right, Kev, thank you. I've been watching you many years and about Calvinism, and you've always used the term ideologically possessed. And I'm looking at it here, I'm reading one of the definitions, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is to feel bound to a social group so tightly that you feel compelled to profess, defend, and act out what you perceive as a collective set of beliefs that animates it. And I'm trying to take that term, try to match something in with the Bible. Would you say ideology possession would be a stronghold in the mind? Would that be an equal
Absolutely.
a stronghold?
Yep.
Okay.
Without doubt.
Okay.
And so the word repent is, to say this another way, the word repent, metanoia, means to be metacognition, metaparadigmatic, to be beyond the paradigm, no longer entrapped by the paradigm, but to be in it. So to tell somebody to repent is another way of telling them they're ideologically possessed and need to not be.
Okay. I got you. All right. That's all I have. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Any other final comments from anybody?
Yeah, I'm really sorry. Did somebody say something? Oh,
That's okay. Go ahead.
No. I talk
Really?
way too much. Roberta, please say something.
No, mine is really low level and unimpressive. You go right
I need to
ahead.
hear something low level.
Well,
I want to hear Roberta.
that verse to
You want to hear a joke?
verse 26.
Verse
Sure.
26, I want to hear what Roberta has to say.
I've just been sitting here thinking, be ye angry could be just the precursor to be ye angry at sin, because really that's all we're really entitled to be angry at. And so be angry at sin, but don't sin. And I'm thinking about this in terms of like
A really good point.
children and parents or spouses, where you're in a relationship and somebody may say something to you that's very hurtful, and that could be construed as sin on their part. But if you play that game and you hit back at that, then you're caught up in that sin rather than not sinning in that situation. And then if you let it steep overnight, like, don't let the sun go down on it, that lets it steep, that lets it simmer, that lets it perk. That opens the door for more sin, because then you start thinking about what happened 15 years ago that, and then it just piles up and you become embroiled in a sin that sometimes you can't get past. And so that's kind of the way I was looking at that verse, which, like I said, isn't philosophical, and it's pretty low level, but
There's no requirement for anything to be philosophical to say it.
Oh, please.
I like that, sin is perhaps the only thing we're entitled to be angry about. That's thought-provoking.
Mhm.
Does somebody have a joke before we go? Was that Joe?
No, I was just kidding because
Doesn't
you
have
said you
anything to
wanted to
do
hear
with
something low
snowmen,
level.
does it?
Not about a snowman.
How low level do you want to go?
Not below the waist. All right, guys. Well,
Peace out.
ease out. Can't wait till
Yeah.
next time.